When talking about influential games, it's almost impossible to not mention Doom. In this video, I'm going to break down why Doom is seen as the father of FPS, starting with its creation and following the series all the way to today, going through each release, how it was made, what it brought to the table, and why it mattered. Doom was released on December 10th, 1993 by a small team named ID Software. Only around 5 people worked on the first Doom game. John Carmack was the lead programmer and built the engine the game ran on. John Romero handled the design along with contributions from Tom Hall and Sandy Peterson, which I will go into detail on later. Adrian Carmack, no relation to John, created the art alongside Kevin Cloud. Their goal with Doom was to combine action with horror themes. Some of their inspirations were the movie Aliens and a Dungeons & Dragons campaign that the team had played. And I know you're probably curious what happened in that campaign, so I'll explain it to you. A lot of the ID Software guys would play D&D together, and Tom Hall was the Dungeon Master, and his campaigns would usually lean heavy into, one could say, dark and hellish themes. One of them even ended up with a player storming a demon-infested military base with futuristic type weapons. That basic setup ended up becoming the backbone for Doom. Along with the film Aliens, they also took inspiration from movies like The Evil Dead and Predator to get their atmosphere. Just basically imagine being dropped into a movie like that with a shotgun. One of the main reasons why Doom is the father of FPS is because it pioneered the modern first-person shooter formula. Mind you, ID Software had already pioneered the first-person shooter genre with Wolfenstein 3D in 1992. So to go from something like this, which is already leading the genre at the time, to something like this, 1 to 2 years later, is just absolutely insane. The big leap in gameplay and graphics is thanks to John Carmack's new engine. Unlike Wolfenstein, which has flat levels with walls at right angles, the Doom engine allows for walls and floors at any angle or height, but does not allow areas to be stacked vertically. The lighting system was also pretty unique. The game calculates a predetermined light level of a specific area and then changes the color palette of that section's surface textures to mimic how dark that area would look. The story never really gets in the way of the gameplay, as it's only really explained in between chapters. Players would assume the role of an unnamed space marine who fans would later name Doom Guy, and you would fight demons unleashed by experiments on Mars. Doom was also one of the first games to introduce networked multiplayer and would coin the term deathmatch for its competitive mode. It would also allow user-created mods via the format, and this would fuel a thriving modding community till this day. When Doom finally released, it was a hit, and not just because of its gameplay. It was also because of its shareware model. ID Software's CEO Jay Wilbur decided that since they were going to make most of their money from directly selling to customers, that they would leverage the shareware market as much as possible. Shareware is incomplete software, in this case a game, that you get for free, and eventually they expect you to pay money for the full version. The shareware copy of Doom only had the first episode, and this is what was distributed to most software retailers in hopes that customers would buy the full version from ID Software themselves. But this shareware model ultimately succeeded because of the internet. On December 10th, 1993, at midnight, they finally released Doom to the public. However, there was one big problem. The team at ID Software wasn't able to connect to the server at the University of Wisconsin-Madison where they planned to upload the game because there were so many users already connected in anticipation of the release. So much so that the network administrator was forced to increase the number of connections and then kick off all of the users to make room. When it finally finished 30 minutes later, 10,000 people attempted to download the game at once, crashing the university's network. An event this large on the internet was almost unheard of at the time. Within hours of Doom coming out, university networks began banning Doom multiplayer games because a rush of players overwhelmed their systems. This got so bad so quickly that John Carmack had to release a patch the next morning in response to complaints of network congestion from administrators. All in all, in its first year, Doom sold around 140 to 200,000 copies. By late 1995, Doom was estimated to be installed on more computers than Microsoft's new operating system, Windows 95. As you can tell from the sales, the game was insanely popular. PC Gamer US named it the best computer game of all time, and GamesRadar UK named Doom Game of the Year in 1993. With the success of the first game, ID Software quickly moved on to make a sequel for it. And on October 10th, 1994, they would do exactly that. Doom 2 was mostly created by the same team that had worked on Doom. John Carmack decided to refine the existing engine instead of just overhauling it, and Sandy Peterson and level designer American McGee took on a larger share of the level creation this time. The game was really straightforward. It essentially was just a continuation of Doom, or more Doom, and this allowed the team to capitalize on the popularity of the game in just a year. Doom 2 kept the gameplay mainly intact and only really enhanced small things. At its bare bones, Doom 2 had the same engine as Doom. The main additions were a single new weapon, the Super Shotgun, and a handful of enemy types that added variety and challenge. The level design also became larger and more complex. The story continued on from the original Doom and kept it simple just like the original, with the fight being brought to Earth, and this time getting over 30 levels plus secret levels. The next year, Doom 2 would receive an expansion pack called Mastery Levels for Doom 2. This was a collection of 21 new levels created by various community authors and was released officially. Interestingly, an additional episode titled No Rest for the Living was later made by Nerve Software in 2010 for the Xbox Live Arcade port. Let's go and look back at the original Doom for a second. You may have heard people talk about how Doom can run on anything. Well, that's kinda true. Let me just talk about for a second all the different devices that Doom has been ported to or played on. And bear with me because this is going to take a minute. First, let's talk about official ports. On personal computers, you can play on Microsoft Windows, Linux, Acorn, Classic Mac OS, Solaris, IRIX, OS, and NextStep. On consoles, you can play on the Sega 32X, the Atari Jaguar, Super Nintendo, PlayStation, 3DO Interactive Multiplayer, Sega Saturn, Game Boy Advance, Xbox, Xbox 360, and PlayStation 3. And finally, a couple of the most interesting things that Doom was ported to officially is the Husqvarna robotic lawnmower, MSN TV internet appliances, and the Raspberry Pi Pico. But once you start looking into the non-official ports is when you start to see the insanity. Some of the more normal things that Doom was ported to was the Nintendo DS, the iPod 5th generation, and the Nintendo Wii. But that's not even the tip of the iceberg. You know what? Let me stop beating around the bush. Here's my top 10 ways you can play Doom. Number 1, on an ATM. Number 2, on an oscilloscope. Number 3, on a printer. Number 4, a graphing calculator. Number 5, a pregnancy test. Number 6, a business card. Number 7, an HDMI adapter. Number 8, a PDF file. Number 9, a Google search bar. And finally, number 10, gut bacteria. I think I just had to talk about that insanity before I moved on to Doom 2 and its ports. Initially, Doom 2 was only ported to Mac in 1995 and the Game Boy Advance in 2002, but later saw releases on modern consoles and even phones. Doom 2 was unsurprisingly another commercial success. It lacked the novelty of the original Doom, but benefited from what it started. In the US alone, it sold over 1.5 million copies by 1999. Fans definitely appreciated the new super shotgun, which quickly became a fan favorite weapon, and the harder demons, though some reviews noted that it felt more like an expansion than a sequel. Although it wasn't as influential as the original Doom, Doom 2 definitely cemented the franchise's popularity and introduced elements that would recur in community mods in later games. Overall, by focusing on refinement over innovation, it kept fans engaged while ID Software moved on to other projects like the Quake series. After this, it would be almost 10 years until ID Software releases Doom 3, but they were still busy in between that. In 1995, the Ultimate Doom was released and was an updated retail version of the original Doom. It bundled the original 3 episodes of Doom and added a brand new 4th episode titled Thy Flesh Consumed. The 4th episode consists of 9 extra hard levels designed to extend the story, acting as a bridge between Doom and Doom 2. Story-wise, it shows the Marine fighting through hell after the events of the original game, setting up why he is absent on Earth at the start of Doom 2. The Ultimate Doom was sold in stores, compared to the original Doom being distributed via shareware, which gave newcomers a way to buy the full game in one package. While not a new game per se, Ultimate Doom kept the momentum of the franchise going. Fans welcomed the extra episode, and several of its maps became famous for their challenge. This release also marked the point where Doom became more accessible to players who didn't partake in the shareware era. Today, most commercial releases of classic Doom are based on the Ultimate Doom. The next year, Final Doom was released, and this was not developed by ID Software directly, but by 2 groups of fans turned designers, Team TNT and the Casali brothers. And although it wasn't developed by ID Software directly, they were under ID's supervision. Final Doom is essentially a standalone expansion to Doom 2. The game was comprised of 2 separate 32-level campaigns, TNT Evolution by Team TNT and the Plutonia Experiment made by the brothers. Originally, these projects were high-quality fan-made megawads that ID Software approved and published as an official product. The Casali brothers each built roughly half of the Plutonia levels, known for their difficulty. ID Software's role was mainly in publishing and ensuring quality, making one of the earliest cases of community content becoming an official release. Final Doom uses the Doom 2 engine and gameplay. There are no new weapons or monsters beyond what Doom 2 had. Instead, it offers 64 new levels that are generally much harder and more complex. TNT Evolution features new music and a tech-based theme, whereas Plutonia is infamous for its difficult combat and complicated level design. Both episodes assume mastery of Doom. They were targeting hardcore players seeking more challenge after Doom 2, just like the Ultimate Doom. Since it was essentially an expansion, Final Doom flew under the radar compared to its predecessors. It was marketed as the final installment of the classic Doom saga, coming out after ID Software had moved on to developing Quake. Reviews noted the high difficulty and quality of some of the fan-made levels, but it also felt more like a map pack for enthusiasts. It didn't sell at the levels of Doom 1 or 2, but it did respectably among the fanbase and solidified the idea that Doom's longevity could be extended by community contributions. All in all, Final Doom demonstrated the strength of the Doom modding community. I mean, this was essentially a commercial product that had been created by fans. However, in 1997, another fan-made Doom game under license from ID Software called Doom 64 was developed for the Nintendo 64 console. Unlike previous console versions of Doom, which were ports of the PC games, Doom 64 was an original entry built specifically for the N64. Since ID Software was overseeing the project, they told developers Midway Games that they wanted to name it Doom 64 instead of Doom 3 because they were saving this title for a future PC project. Doom 64 was very similar to Doom 1 and 2, but it implemented some more technical enhancements, larger, more detailed sprites and textures than the PC games, true dynamic lighting effects, and even moving 3D geometry in levels. These were all things that previous Doom games could not do. Another difference was the art style. All the demons' designs and sprites were redone with a more gruesome look, and the game's tone is more dark. I think the most important thing to mention about Doom 64 is that it's actually a direct sequel to Doom 2. At the end of the game, Doomguy would decide to stay in Hell to prevent further invasions, and this ending would later be referenced as a bridge to the 2016 series storyline, and in 2020, the re-release of Doom 64 even added a new chapter called The Lost Levels, explicitly connecting Doom 64's ending to the events of the Doom 2016 reboot. It wasn't actually until that re-release in March 2020 that you could play Doom 64 officially on anything but the Nintendo 64. Fast forward 7 years to 2004, and ID Software would finally release Doom 3, published by Activision. After such a long hiatus, ID Software wanted to reboot the brand as something new. By the late 1990s, they had shifted focus to the Quake series, and many original Doom team members, including John Romero, had left the company. Despite that, the idea of returning to Doom persisted. In 2000, lead programmer John Carmack and newly promoted designer Tim Willits spearheaded a project to remake Doom, essentially starting from scratch on a new engine. This was internally greenlit, and Doom 3 was officially unveiled at E3 2002 with a dramatic tech demo that impressed audiences. This demo was famously leaked online and would build enormous hype for the game. Carmack's new engine, known as ID Tech 4, allowed for unseen graphical realism at the time. Fully 3D modeled characters and environments were a huge leap from the sprite-based classics. But that's definitely not the only way that it departed from the original Doom series. With Willits serving as the lead designer, the team put a strong emphasis on story and presentation, hiring professional voice actors and writing more dialogue than previous games. After some delays, Doom 3 released in 2004, about 10 years after Doom 2, making it one of that year's most anticipated PC titles. But I'll get into how that game was received in a minute. First, let's talk about the story of Doom 3. Doom 3 is a reimagining of the original Doom premise rather than a direct sequel. It's set on Mars in 2145, where the UAC's experiments with teleportation to Hell go horribly wrong. You play as a lone Space Marine survivor, once again fighting demons, but this time the story is delivered through in-game cutscenes, voice logs, and NPC interactions, a departure from the minimalist storytelling in the originals. The gameplay of Doom 3 took a radical turn toward survival horror. It's slower paced and more atmospheric than the run and gun style of the originals. You still got all the classic weapons like the pistol, shotgun, plasma gun, BFG, etc., but with modernizations like reloading mechanics and more realistic damage. When Doom 3 finally released, it was a commercial success and a major event in 2004. It sold over 3.5 million copies by 2007, making it one of ID's best-selling titles. It was well received by critics and won a few awards, but longtime Doom fans were split on the new direction. A portion of the audience missed the run and gun high speed of the originals and found Doom 3's gameplay more repetitive or slower due to its horror pacing. Regardless of what people thought about the game, Doom 3 helped bring Doom to a new generation and showed that the franchise could be reinvented. Its success demonstrated that it was possible to revive a classic IP with a modern spin, and this would pave the way for other reboots. And technically, it pushed PC gaming forward, because a lot of people upgraded their PC specifically to play Doom 3. Even though Doom 3 is a bit of an outlier in the series, it still definitely had its impact. It would be another dozen years before we'd see another release in the mainline Doom franchise, but in between that, we would have some small releases. From 2005 to 2009, ID Software, and more specifically John Carmack, was really interested in the mobile gaming scene. In 2005, they would partner with Fountainhead Entertainment to create Doom RPG, a turn-based role-playing game for early 2000s mobile phones. And then later on, in 2009, they would release Doom RPG 2 and Doom Resurrection. And I just wanted to mention these, even though they're pretty niche, just to highlight John Carmack's personal interest in mobile game development in the mid-2000s, because I just thought it was pretty interesting. This was also some ID Software's last projects before the Bethesda acquisition in 2009. After Doom 3, ID Software spent years prototyping a Doom 4. Initially, the concept was a scripted shooter set on Earth during a demon invasion, but this version struggled in development. Internal and external feedback was negative, with some dubbing it Call of Doom for feeling too much like Call of Duty with demons. In 2013, Bethesda and ID's leadership decided to scrap that approach entirely. Peter Hines of Bethesda later said the project at that time wasn't Doom enough. They put together a new team, including Doom's new creative director Hugo Martin, and refocused the game on recapturing the fast, frantic spirit of the original. Essentially, this 2016 release became a reboot, not directly connected to Doom 3's story, but rather a modern reimagining. Using the ID Tech 6 engine, the developer set out to make a game that felt modern but paid homage to Doom's legacy. Many classic ID alumni had moved on, so a new generation of ID crafted this game. Marty Stratton was the game director/producer, and Hugo Martin was the creative director driving the game's artistic and gameplay vision. Doom 2016 turned out to be a complete return to high-speed, gory action. In contrast to the slow horror of Doom 3, players are encouraged to keep moving and attacking aggressively. This is reinforced by a new mechanic called Glory Kills, which are melee executions that reward health drops from enemies. When your health is low, instead of running away, you rip and tear a staggered demon to heal yourself. This created a fresh combat loop that felt both modern and true to the old school games. The player can also double jump and vault onto ledges, which adds a ton of mobility. Some classic weapons returned, such as the shotgun, plasma rifle, and rocket launcher, alongside modern additions like the Gauss cannon. The game also features no reloading. Guns are always ready to fire, again keeping the pace fast. Another addition is light RPG elements. You can upgrade weapons and armor abilities via collectible points, though these enhancements don't slow the gameplay. The multiplayer mode was an arena-style shooter, sort of reminiscent of Quake, and the game even included a level editor called SnapMap for users to create and share custom maps. For the story, you once again play as the Doom Marine, now often called the Doom Slayer, awakened on a UAC base on Mars during a demon outbreak. The plot nods to past games but largely stands alone. Scientists, led by Dr. Olivia Pierce, have deliberately opened a portal to Hell to harness Argent energy, and it's up to the Slayer to stop the invasion. The narrative is delivered with minimal cutscenes and even some humor. The Doomslayer often literally punches aside exposition. This self-aware approach resonated with fans. It acknowledged that Doom is first and foremost about action, while still providing lore for those who wanted it. The game's soundtrack by Mick Gordon also became iconic, deeply enhancing the badass factor of the gameplay. Doom 2016 received critical acclaim and was widely seen as the successful revival of the series. Reviewers praised the game's fast, fluid combat, level design, and the way it respected Doom's heritage while feeling fresh. Some people highlighted it as a great example of a retro-style shooter done in a modern engine. The only weak point really was the multiplayer, and even that was considered fun, just not particularly groundbreaking. The campaign, on the other hand, earned multiple Best Shooter and Game of the Year nominations in 2016. By the end of the year, Doom 2016 had sold millions of copies. More importantly, this game had proved that classic first-person shooter gameplay had a place in the modern market. It increased interest in arena and fast-paced shooters, arguably sparking a mini revival of similar games. To this day, the character of the Doomslayer is a staple in our pop culture. The phrase "rip and tear," pulled from an old Doom comic and exemplified in this game, also became a meme and rallying cry. All in all, this reboot laid the groundwork for an entire new era of Doom. And finally, we get to the last full release in the Doom series. Doom Eternal is a direct sequel to the 2016 reboot, once again led by game director Hugo Martin and executive producer Marty Stratton. It was built on the new ID Tech 7 engine, allowing for even more complex environments and better graphics than Doom 2016. The team's goal was to one-up Doom 2016 in every way: more weapons, enemies, faster gameplay, and a deeper narrative. Doom Eternal's gameplay can be described as combat chess. The player juggles a wide array of tools to survive increasingly aggressive hordes. New movement abilities were also added. Doomslayer now has a dash with up to 2 charges, which greatly increases mobility. There's also a wall climbing and horizontal bars in levels that allow swinging, adding a platformer-like transversal element that makes areas more vertical. To balance the faster movement, the game introduced a resource management loop. Enemies are essentially piñatas that drop different resources depending on how you kill them. You have a shoulder-mounted flame belch flamethrower that sets enemies on fire and causes them to drop armor shards. Using the chainsaw on enemies yields ammunition, and performing glory kills gives you health. All of this forces the player to constantly switch tactics, use all weapons, and stay on the offensive. Every enemy in Eternal has specific weaknesses or optimal weapons to defeat it. For example, shooting a grenade into a Cacodemon's mouth, or using a plasma rifle to detonate an Arachnotron's turret. The weapon roster gets expanded with additions like the Ballista replacing the Gauss cannon, an upgrade to the plasma rifle that can microwave enemies, and the Crucible energy sword for instant melee kills. A fan favorite is the updated super shotgun, now with the meat hook, a grappling hook that latches onto enemies, letting you pull yourself towards them for a point-blank shot. This isn't only great for offense, but doubles as a mobility tool to slingshot around arenas. All these changes made Eternal even faster and more skill demanding than Doom 2016. Doom Eternal expands the lore by a lot, so I'll only be scratching the surface of it in this video. It brings the fight back to Earth just like Doom 2, but also spans locations like Mars, heaven-like dimensions, and the homeworld of Sentinel Warriors. It explicitly links back to the original game's storyline. The Doomslayer is revealed to be the same person as the Doom Marine from Doom 1, 2, and 64, having been elevated to a godlike warrior over eons. The narrative is given much more prominence in this game, delivered through cutscenes and in-game dialogue, though the Slayer remains a silent protagonist. Hugo Martin described it as Doom's Avengers, bringing together threads from all Doom eras. Despite the greater emphasis on story, Eternal easily maintained Doom's over-the-top action. The game also includes homages like the original Doomslayer's Fortress, which has an old PC to play classic Doom and other Easter eggs. Before I go into the reception and impact that Doom Eternal had, I want to talk about its expansions. The Ancient Gods Part 1 and Part 2 are story expansions for Doom Eternal. They were released as DLC, but are standalone in that you don't need to own Doom Eternal to play them. These expansions pick up right after the end of Doom Eternal, and without getting into spoilers, Part 1 has the Slayer facing a revived Ancient Evil, and Part 2 culminates in a battle against the Dark Lord. Overall, the DLC did a good job of wrapping up the entire arc of Doom Eternal. When Doom Eternal initially released, it broke franchise records. It doubled the launch revenue of Doom 2016, grossing over $450 million in its first 9 months. Some people called it one of the best first-person shooters ever made. However, some people were split on whether they liked 2016 or the 2020 Eternal better. Some people just liked the simplicity of the 2016 game, but most other people liked the experience of Doom Eternal. Once again, people loved Mick Gordon's soundtrack, but this would be his last collaboration with ID Software due to some internal conflicts. It would also launch alongside Nintendo's Animal Crossing, which would lead to some pretty funny memes about the polar opposite games. Its release in March 2020 at the start of the global pandemic probably boosted its success as people were hungry for new games and definitely had a lot of time to play them. Culturally, Eternal continued to raise the profile of the Doomslayer as an iconic gaming hero. And just like the original games, the fan community embraced Eternal with things like custom levels, speedruns, and even mods. Overall, Doom Eternal proved that ID Software could successfully evolve the series while staying true to its roots. And finally, the newest game in the Doom series called Doom: The Dark Ages is set to release May 15th, 2025, here soon after this video releases. Doom: The Dark Ages is set to be a prequel to Doom 2016 and aims to bridge the gap between the classic Doom games and the modern Doomslayer. The story will explore the origin of the Doomslayer in the realm of Argent D'Nur and the Night Sentinels, essentially telling how the original Doom Marine was transformed into the Demon Slayer of legend. It's expected to depict the medieval chapter of the Doomslayer's life alluded to in Doom Eternal. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what your favorite Doom game is, or what you're hoping to see in the Dark Ages. If you liked the video, feel free to leave a like, and if you want more stuff like this, hit subscribe. Either way, thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you in the next one.